Fox Business Alert, new details coming out on the pressures on Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson to bail out Freddie and Fannie. Now, according to a report from the newspaper The Australian, Chinese bankers barraged Paulson to find out what was happening with the mortgage giants. China's four biggest banks pared back their holdings of Fannie and Freddie debt. That and warnings from big U.S. bondholder PIMCO may have forced Paulson to act to save Freddie and Fannie. Well, let's get the view from Asia now with legendary investor and our happy hour friend, Jim Rogers. He joins us on the phone now. So, Jim, what do you make of this? You know, on your end of the spectrum over there in Asia, is there any merit to these reports that maybe our U.S. executives, officials, were looking more to bail out their Asian investors, friends?
Well, of course they were. Everybody who owned Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac put pressure on them, but the main pressure came from America. I mean, PIMCO alone put gigantic amounts of effort into getting Paulson to do this. And as you know, PIMCO is a huge customer of Goldman Sachs, but there are a lot of huge customers of Goldman Sachs in America, and they were all calling up Paulson one way or the other and saying, please, you got to save us. It's outrageous. It's outrageous, Cody, that they took your money and my money to save a bunch of guys who made horrible mistakes, some of whom were crooks, and we're going to pay $5 trillion. We, the American taxpayer.
$5 trillion. It's going to cost us at least $1 trillion, even if it's just down 20% over the next couple of years. But actually, elaborate a little bit on that. When you look at the actual bailout, PIMCO got $1.7 billion payday in 24 hours after this bailout. How much did the Asians take home off of that, the Chinese itself?
Well, the Chinese had a huge position. Apparently, I mean, I don't know this, but apparently they had a huge position in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So who knows what they made? I don't know how much the bonds went up, but I'm told anyway, that the Asians had $400 or $500 billion of this garbage, so they must have made whatever the amount it went up.
Hey, Jim,
but again, Cody, Fannie Mae, they had $5 trillion in debt. The Asians say they had 10% of it. I mean, that's $500 billion.
Exactly.
The other $4.5 billion was elsewhere.
Hey, Jim, you've been talking about a super crash. Do you think that because the federal government is just bailing out this company, bailing that company, that our debt is just out of control and getting worse, and there seems to be no end in sight? What's this talk about a super crash in our financial system?
Well, I've never used that term, but we're certainly seeing a major crash in the financial system. Most of the investment banks are bankrupt, and many of the commercial banks are bankrupt, you know. So it's happening. We're making the same mistake that the Japanese made in the 1990s. They refused to let anybody go bankrupt, and they still talk about the lost decade in Japan. America made the same mistakes in the 70s. Arthur Burns refused to let anybody go bankrupt. We had one of the worst decades in the economy in American history. So this is all going to just prolong things instead of cleaning out the system so we can start over.
Jim, you know, on that note, too, elaborate on that. Have we tipped into, I guess what I'm asking is this. Are these government bailouts a sign of the crash, or are they the catalyst, the causing? I think they're the reason that we've got a crisis in confidence, not the other way around.
Well, it's a downward spiral. One thing leads to another. It's symbiotic, if you will, only it's symbiotic on the downside. People get into trouble, we bail them out, which causes the next guy to get into trouble, because all of these things have consequences. And unfortunately, somebody's printing a lot of money. The government's leveraging up its balance sheet. Somebody's got to pay all this debt. Interest rates will eventually go higher. This is not a good way to do things.
Any chance at all that it comes out okay, Jim?
Any chance? Well, it's come out okay for the bondholders of Fannie Mae right now. It's not come out okay for you and me. As I say, there's two sides to every coin.
Jim, you had talked about before. I'm getting the bad feedback. Go ahead.
Jim, on the same thing, we're sort of, doggone it, Jim, we're getting a sign to wrap out of it. Last word for us, 30 seconds.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Cody.
Jim, I'm just giving you the last word. You got 30 seconds to wrap us out.
Well, just be very, very careful, because there are more bankruptcies coming.
Amen.
Well, Jim, we'll have to have you on again, because I wanted to get into the whole aspect where Jim is saying basically that we're more socialist than China is, and but he's really bullish on China, which has been socialist for a long time. So now we're moving in China's direction. So
should we be bullish on?
Anyway, I have a bad feedback from the phoner, so sorry about that, folks.